Welcome to this podcast, Mission GJ. At this time, we have our Apostle Erickson Salazar. How good we're here flowing in the prophetic for the house. That's right. Hello, Tila. How you doing? I'm doing very well, thank you. It's a privilege. Good. We rejoice for having you here with us and to enjoy what you have for us. And in that same line, we would love to learn a little bit more about your experiences here in Generation Joshua in the course of your time here in the last few years, in the different missions you've been on with Apostle, with the ministry. Tell us, Leader Tila. Well, I've had many experiences. It's been very gratifying for me. But one that marked me a lot was the first one, was when he came to train us in consolidating. He came and trained us first, gathered all of us together at the work table, and he told us, take in everything you get, don't complain about anything, don't be bothered by anything, and let's do this. And we went to the first home. There seems like it was a septic tank that was not working, and it smelled really bad. And it seemed like it was something spiritual, because the minute Apostle started to give us the training, I don't know if it was because of the focus that the team had. We focused so much on what he was doing that we only smelled the septic tank for about 10 minutes. Nobody noticed it after that. And he explained that in terms of territory, entities and what operates will always put obstacles, and that's why we have to keep ourselves invisible, low profile, in the midst of the mission, prudent. That's the word that's the mission that impacted me the most, because it seems like the Spirit moved in favor of the consolidation, because the sponsoring, in terms of the environment, everything was favorable for us, which means that Hades will never be able to stand before the church and the mission and the things that we need to make things happen no matter what we face. It's amazing. Wow. I love this session of experiencing the mission, because you bring so many memories. This is like, founding father story. Because the consolidation training, when it was being structured, when that ministry in Mano Guayabo was being structured, it was a hard training. This is how things happen. And Tila remembers that I would tell her, in this table is represented the principalities of this territory. That's right. Do you remember, Tila? And I would say, if we have authority on ourselves, we are going to govern in them. See how deep? So when we went through that training, which was every week, training them for consolidating, then I went with them to consolidate in their neighborhood. And that one that she's referring to was the first one. And look, what was the welcome? A septic tank was broken. And it was a house where it was difficult to get to, it was in the hood. So we sat down and with joy, we sat down and we gave the theory, and then we went to practice. And we went to different missions, different homes for them to see. And I would just start flowing, and they would be like, that was their welcome, right? The septic tank. And that was the welcome. And for them to see my attitude was normal, and I'm talking, chilling. They were like, oh, okay, then everybody will be chilling. You understand? And everything normal, and it was amazing, very, very leveled. Then they came, in the midst of all that, they came and brought us, snacks, and it was very powerful. Everybody afterwards shared what they learned from the experience, because again, this was a training. Then we went to another place and another, until you would see that they had the dominion, because people see this as simple, but the consolidation, if you don't have the authority, or if you don't dominate over yourself, you won't be able to do it. Look, people cannot neglect any mission. There's no great or small mission. Hear me, there's no great or small mission. A mission is a mission, and you have to respect it with the same protocols, the same details, and something more important, the same commitment. There are people that take their commitment a little bit down because, oh, this is not with this person or that person. Look, it could be anyone. Go with the level and the commitment. Prepare yourself. The word says to not underestimate the force of evil, his plan. You understand? His strategies. Don't underestimate. Don't underestimate. You don't know where you're going to be hit with a dart. So in that same way, respect. Respect. Look, I respect human beings, because when you think that there's one that gave his blood for somebody, that person is very important. So people are measured by who died for them. See how you measure them, by who died for them, not based on their status as such, because what I've learned in this way is, like the saying says, that under any small thing, a huge critter can come out. So then you respect every place from which a big critter could come out. And I look at myself like that. I was just a nobody. And Tila says, and the most powerful thing that you were saying, Apostle, is that when you would go consolidate, it wasn't to go bring anything to them, but to bring out the riches of the body. That assessment that would be done, that's where we would discover the professionals in the ministry. That's where we discover what people did. We did assessments that were very important for the ministry in that time. And that, as you spoke clearly, as you would say, there's a lot more wealth in giving than in receiving, because everybody has wealth. And that's why we needed to consolidate, because we needed to discover how the body was. Even when, I was impressed, and even today I was mentioning that to somebody. I was saying, Apostle says to write everything down, to not trust in our memory. And when we write down those minutes, those very wealthy minutes of those meetings, when you go back to those minutes, you see that the structure was being prepared for this time. And before the pandemic, we handle the tools, the technological tools. I was talking to somebody in consolidation today. When I was sat down, you need to write everything down. Use your cell phone. And when I started writing, or when I started giving my first study, I was telling that person that comment, was a battle for me to sit down in front of a computer and write that comment. And I remember that I was given a helper to train me for 2 days for me to learn how to comment the word. And it would be a mess for me. And I would say that it was like a terror for me, technology. But after I exercised and I started to discover a key on the keyboard that would erase, and I started to discover technology, because you can close yourself to change, because in reality it's always going to work for good. Of course, Apostle says, and she's talking to you about that whole training. At the moment, she didn't understand why. Why do I have to do it through my phone? No, yes, do it that way. We have to teach her and preparing her, because it was like an emergency. Because you know that we're always in SOS mode. And then with time, you say, wow, they were training us. Because then, like she say, pandemic hit, and then we knew how to handle technology, and meetings were in person, but then we transitioned them to online, because we didn't know about the pandemic. But then once the pandemic hit, we already had remote meetings. And then they were like, okay, and we're here, let's talk. And then to begin to create that new system, exercising the cyber neurons, it was not easy, because you have to break down walls and barriers and everything. And at the end, the pandemic hit, we kept on moving forward. The whole mission kept on moving forward. We did the transitions we had to do. And sometimes you say, I'm going to tell you something. Sometimes we talk about meetings and such, but nobody works more than we do. And you know that we don't even have enough people for all the work. And you can ask Tila, the work we have now is 100 times more than what at the beginning we would do when we would go to a place. But now, from working remotely, it's much more the demand. And Tila says, since when you are busy in the things of the kingdom, for example, every time you give a class, you are giving yourself the class. You confront yourself with the word. And it's like your daily counseling. You understand? Because it's like the study of self-deliverance. You ourselves hit yourself. And in reality, I'm grateful, because in the midst of the pandemic, if we did not have these connections, for example, I'm seeing a lot of people go crazy in the world and in the community. I am surprised in the lack of balance, in that we today can be sober and in spite of the inconveniences and the things that the marks want to bring up, because the marks will always want to, make their presence known, like you've always said. You remember, Apostle, when you came the first time, how things developed, something that happened, that somebody was driving and almost hit one of us, and you would explain to us that manifestations happen and they're normal, which is what tells you that you are in the correct path. Because if there are no manifestations, tell me, if the enemy is not bothered, he's not going to react. He reacted because really we were always told that there will always be an opposition from evil. We ourselves, there's obstacles to the purpose of God for the mission. Because, for example, the structure is so strong. Apostle, so strong that I can be in my own rebellion. But if I go to a mission and I have to give a study, the structure is the one that comes out to give the study. That model, that pattern is the one that teaches, and you execute what you were taught. Wow, Tila, you're speaking, and that's deep. When the student is telling you, I learned this and that, the student slaps you in the face with their comment. Because it's a structure so much on the rock that truly I say, oh no, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, but you know what? Tila, you need to take this mission on. Okay. Tila, you need to do this. Okay. Because I was exercised in obedience. I had that training in obedience. I obey against rain and storm. Yes, Tila, but you say something. You said something, Tila, that impacted me a lot. And that's what I believe. I believe so much in the structure. That is something very biblical because it was Christ who constituted the structure as such. The Tila was saying, even if you're in your own rebellion, the same structure takes you to execute the work. The work is going to get done no matter what. And I believe so much in that because you say, wait a minute, what do you mean you have people preaching and teaching? But no ministry has a dynamic because they're going to divide your ministry. No, there's no way. Because a structure cannot be divided. The structure is so strong that everyone speaks the same language, Lewis says. And Apostle says what happens is that when Christ, and in this case, the Holy Spirit is the one that guides, the Spirit is not divided. So you could be divided because of whatever ideal, but you have to submit to give what has been established. And like Tila says, you're the one that gets hit on the way back. And I'm the one that it's benefited in being guided by the Spirit because there's no waste. Tila says that joy that you get of assuming what corresponds to you, being effective, being a collaborator of the kingdom, that when you're needed, those that write to me in WhatsApp, my WhatsApp is ministerial. It's ministerial. That's ministerial for me. Every time I see a message, no matter who it's from, of course I'm a collaborator of the kingdom because I always try to not be an obstacle to the mission because it's the Father in front of me. And He has delivered me from so much. Of course, His mercy always bends me over, with the teaching in the Spirit. Always breaks my arm because what operates in me is strong. But the guidance to identify and keep moving forward. If I get stuck to look at myself, then you know what happens, but I keep moving forward. Because the structure itself is the one that's taking me. It's impossible for a person that is connected to not rise up, to go to the ministry chat. It's impossible. The minute they wake up, okay, let me see what the T says. Let me see. By 11 or 12, the prophetic word should be out. Let me see what the word says. Because I'm the one that benefits from having my spirit awakened. And something important, Tila, that sometimes we used to think that connecting once a week or twice a week, and then all of a sudden you're connecting 24/7, 365 days a year. That's like inconceivable for some people. We're connected all the time. We're in a constant high-level intercession because there's no intercession without revelation. So how do you intercede if your spirit is asleep? If your spirit is the one that intercedes? Now is when I understand. Now is that I understand the word expansion. Now is when I understand that word. Because the ministry has been expanded so much that it is impossible to stop. Everything is possible. I have to learn to go through the seasons, and I have to learn to submit myself under authority, because in reality, here it's not about what Tila thinks, it's not about what Tila considers or believes. My opinion needs to be based on what has been established, which is what the Spirit is marking in this time towards a structure that the body follows. But I'm not the whole body. I was saying, Tila, that what you are saying, which is very deep, the prophetic route that you're taking is very powerful, because you're saying you're giving a prophetic description that's very, very strong, and it's good because it teaches what a structure is. Because, okay, how simple. Tila is one of the leaders a leader from which I get the best reports from evangelism and even counseling. They're always like, wow, Tila, and Tila, and Tila, everybody. And I'm like, okay, well, it's incredible, the prophetic. And we rejoice at the same time, because you know that that's not magic. That was constructed, that was built. A person that has been prophetically built and that you know has miles of flight. People have no idea, the same way how David was called to go behind the sheep. You know how a prophet gets burned out and how they rise up and they get developed. And in the case of a lot of us that are head of our bloodline and even head of the territory, depending on the territory where we're at. So what happens? We are sometimes having battles in the generational that sometimes we say, what is happening? What is this battle? Where what happens is that you are going against the principalities and the powers. And everything that we do, the simplest thing that we do, in this case, saving a life, in this case, like Tila, taking on her mission every day, that is going against Hades, bothering Hades. So you hear this authority, consistency, and I love the prophetic descriptions that you make. They're very aligned, and they teach us the powerful thing about formation and the matter of connection, like Tila says, that we wait for the tea, that we wait for the prophetic word and the podcast. We wait for every prophetic content. That is the sword of the Spirit that comes to break and that comes to align us and comes to give us the prophetic guidelines of the house. Because where does the prophetic line of the house come from? The word, which is the sword of the Spirit. That's where everything comes from. Listen, the word says that we all have one spirit. So how does a person that is in this city and one is in Spain and one in Italy and or in different parts of the United States or South America, how can we all think the same? And when you say, wait a minute, how are we going to accomplish that? Well, easy, connecting to the same word. The word is the one that awakens the spirit. And you hear Attila in a prophetic flow, how she's doing now. Of course, you're like, that tells you that is a person that is connected. And that is connected doesn't mean that we all don't lack things. We're human beings. We're normal. And more than human beings, it's a matter that we have always said, holiness is not doing it well. It's acknowledging. It's not so much, we got to understand that we're vulnerable, we're incapable, insufficient. We are limited. Now, what makes us be people that, how we handle things, like Leader Tila says, that you see that wisdom, that prophetic wisdom, there's no way to say that there's not a connection there, because it pours out of her, the prophetic pours out of her. And this is somebody that is in the midst of many territorial battles to be able to resist the processes and the transitions she had to live through. A ministry that went through a transition that was like for you to run away. I can't cry, but I'm going to say, woof! It was deep. It was strong. And for you to see today and say, wow, we made it. What did we accomplish? We brought out the children, for the children to come out. Because, religion, what it has is hype people. And like today's, Like the word says, a word says, God didn't call you, Christ didn't call you to see his glory. He called you to show his glory. So these were people that were seeing the glory of God. And the apostolic came and said, okay, it's no time to see the glory of God anymore. Now you need to show it. How? What do you mean that you're going to show the glory of God? But what are you saying? But wait, apostle, what are you saying? That you're going to show the glory of God. You're going to preach, you're going to evangelize, you're going to teach. But who? You. That's what I like the most. Lewis says, yeah, when the structuring began, that you were like, yeah, no, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And we were like, what? Why? And they, yeah, Apostle says, and they were all like talking amongst each other. What is he saying? What is he talking about? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, teaching, structuring. It was like a associate's degree or a master's degree. Normal. And then now they didn't even realize, they don't even realize to this day everything they did. They still can't realize what they did. Tila realized today because we called her. It was sometimes until 2, 1 a.m. Formation, 2 in the morning, I will get home. Formation from 7 p.m. Yeah, because there was hunger, there was thirst. The body was demanding that too. Because what we were being told was something that maybe we were told on the surface, but it was deep. It wasn't form, it was depth. And you know, we would only write in a notebook. And then you wouldn't even sleep after that. Because your spirit would just be activated. That we would just, you would understand and understand and understand. Like revelations that you were receiving about the different points. Which is what happens to those that, you know, that preach, because the Spirit reveals to them. And I know that this is from the Spirit, and this was done with the authority, because really it was a change. There's a change. We handle ourselves differently. In the midst of it all, we handle ourselves differently. I'm going to confess something now that I have the opportunity to do so. A thief came one Saturday to my shop, and in my nature, when I reacted and I took hold of her, when I was going to take care of her, handle her, it's like I heard the Spirit say, what are you going to do? When I was ready to handle her the way I normally would have. And I let her go. I let her go. And I said, my goodness. But after I share this prophetic word, then for somebody to maybe record me and put me on social media having an issue with somebody, that would not be showing kingdom. So that put the brakes on me, and the woman apologized to me. And I said, no, it's okay, you're excused. And everybody was like, you're going to let her go? And I said, yes, let her go with God. Let her go with God, because it's like that. And I told the sisters from the church, I said, listen, God, the Holy Spirit didn't let me fail, because you know how things are usually handled. You know, when you get a hold of a thief, you know how we handle that in my community. It's very delicate, Apostle says. And Tila says, Apostle says that's a prophetic, and Tila says, in reality, you know, you have to be careful, you have to be mindful, because your children are looking at you, your family is looking at you. You just have to model. You have to model what you're learning, what you're reading every single day. In spite of all that, the family, when you advise them, they hear you. There's authority. And that is a structure that takes you to have that authority, because people are paying attention to you. So when the prophetic dials, I put them with a speaker here at work for everybody to eat, to nourish themselves. The seed is being sown. And that's very important, Apostle says. It's important to establish that in your territory. This is my territory. To flow in the prophetic for the house. You know what that means? That we flow in our house, and those that want to come here to this podcast is because they wanted to, but we're flowing in the prophetic for the house. It's just like at home, you put your prophetic dial, and whoever came to your house or your business, that's your business. So you came to my business. And that's important to establish a prophetic in your territory, because that is where you have legal right. That's where you have legal right to proclaim the prophetic in your house. That's very important, very important. And we rejoice because in reality, to hear you teaches us that the seed fell in good soil. Because today we see the fruit, a fruit that is reflected in other lives. And I myself, from my apostolic position as a missionary, I run through different territories. Tila's name as a prophet is very much mentioned, and that fills me with joy to know that mission that one day the Holy Spirit sent us on as a ministry to see the fruit continue to grow, and that not just didn't stay there, but others are also receiving. And that teaches us what the Word says, that we need to give by grace what we have received by grace.
Gracias por sintonizar nuestro podcast Misión GJ. Nos vemos en un próximo episodio.